The new American dream is to leave America.
Millions of Americans are literally giving up. Like day by day, they're saying, I'm done, I'm quitting, I'm not doing this anymore, because we're all tired of it.
You want to know what the American dream is like? Let me tell you. Every day I wake up hoping today is the last day on earth. I'm tired of it here.
There is a paradox happening in America. Many people are earning more money than they did 10 years ago. The stock market continues to set new milestones. Technology continues to develop at an unprecedented pace. However, more and more people are saying that they want to give up. Not giving up the job, not leaving the city, but rather giving up the belief that all your efforts will eventually be rewarded. That is a very small, very quiet change, but also extremely dangerous. Because history shows that nations do not only weaken when the economy faces difficulties, they begin to fracture when ordinary people can no longer see their own future. In this video, we will not only talk about house prices, inflation, or the cost of living. We will seek answers to a much bigger question: what has quietly broken in American society, causing millions to start giving up? If we only look at the headlines in the newspapers, it's easy to think that what is causing Americans to give up is simply inflation, housing prices, or prolonged political debates. But if we take a step back and look at the bigger picture, we will see that these are just surface cracks. What is truly breaking lies much deeper. It is a social contract, an invisible promise that has shaped America for nearly 8 decades. That promise is very simple. Study hard, work hard, and step by step build a life more stable than your parents. A full-time job will help you buy a house, support a family, and have a comfortable old age. That was not just a dream, but once a common belief of millions of people. But what is noteworthy is that nowadays, many people no longer debate whether that promise is appealing or not. They are starting to wonder whether it still exists. That is the biggest turnaround. When a society loses faith in the path to the future, even economic or technological achievements can hardly compensate for that sense of insecurity. Think about it. If a young person believes that no matter how hard they try, it will be difficult to buy their first house, will they still look at working overtime with the same hopeful eyes as the previous generation? This is not just the story of America, but a question that many developed countries must also ponder. Interestingly, the American dream has never been written into law, nor is it included in any contract. It exists thanks to the people's faith, and that trust is like a bridge. When it is intact, millions of people are ready to move forward without looking down. But as soon as a few planks start to wobble, every step becomes cautious. That's why more and more people are postponing buying houses, getting married, or having children. Not necessarily because they lack ambition, but because they are no longer sure if the bridge ahead is sturdy enough. If you also find this topic worth delving into, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next analyses. And I would also love to hear your opinion. In your view, what is truly breaking in America, the economy, politics, or the people's trust? Because this is just the beginning. When a social contract begins to lose its effectiveness, the consequences do not stop at the numbers in economic reports. What is even more surprising is the way it quietly changes the thoughts, choices, and even the future of each individual. And in the next part, we will see an even more thought-provoking paradox. Americans are no longer just quitting their jobs, they are gradually giving up on the very expectations that once made the American dream. If we pay close attention, we will notice something very interesting. The media often talks a lot about Americans quitting their jobs, changing jobs, or quiet quitting. But perhaps that is no longer the biggest story. What is happening more quietly, deeply, and also more thought-provoking is that many people are no longer quitting their jobs, but they are giving up on the expectations that once made them willing to work hard. This is a very big difference, because quitting a job can simply mean changing workplaces, while giving up expectations means changing the way a person views their own future. And when that happens to millions of people at the same time, it is no longer a personal story, but a signal of a societal change. Let's start with the most familiar dream: buying a house. There was a time when owning the first house was seen as a milestone marking a person's entry into adulthood. Nowadays, for many young people, that story has changed. They no longer say, "When will we buy a house?" but have changed to, "Will we ever be able to buy a house?" just a difference between the words when and if ever, but it's a complete shift in mindset. The first shock point lies here. When the question shifted from when to whether, faith began to waver. Not everyone has given up on the goal of buying a house, but many have stopped planning for it. A dream no longer disappears with a loud bang. Sometimes it is just quietly tucked away in a drawer and never mentioned again. Then comes another milestone that was once considered a natural part of life: getting married and having children. More and more young people share that they love children. They still want to have a family, but every time they sit down to calculate the costs of housing, education, healthcare, and childcare, the budget spreadsheet leaves them silent. The turning point lies in the fact that they are not giving up because they no longer love family life, but because they fear they cannot provide a good enough life for their children. When fear gradually outweighs hope, the decision to postpone becomes an understandable choice. It's not selfishness, but often the result of very practical calculations. Another change that is also occurring in the mindset of the younger generation is the way they view education. There was a time when a university degree was almost seen as a guaranteed ticket to a stable future. Nowadays, many students are asking a different question. Will the field they study today still have value in a few years? When technology develops rapidly and the labor market constantly fluctuates, many people no longer see a degree as the destination, but rather as one of many tools that must be continuously updated. That is the third shock. The belief in studying to change one's life is gradually being replaced by studying to not be left behind. Two phrases may sound similar, but the emotions behind them are completely different. One side is hope, one side is defense. If you also find these changes worth contemplating, take a second to hit like and subscribe, not to please the algorithm, but to give discussions like this a better chance to reach more people who are interested in the very subtle movements of society. And then there is another dream that is less often mentioned, but speaks volumes: retirement. In the past, retirement was often envisioned as a reward after decades of labor. Nowadays, many young people even joke that they will work until the Wi-Fi at the nursing home is strong enough. The statement sounds humorous, but behind it lies a sense of unease. The most notable point is, when a generation stops believing in the possibility of retirement, they also begin to stop planning for the long term. And this is what particularly concerns social researchers. A society finds it very difficult to maintain development momentum if young people only dare to plan for the next 6 months or a year, instead of 10 or 20 years like previous generations. But wait, there's an even more interesting question. Is all of this just a sense of pessimism amplified by social media? Or is there a deeper psychological mechanism behind it that makes millions of people feel that their efforts no longer bring deserving rewards? That is the most important piece of the puzzle. Because in the next part, we will delve into the paradox that makes many people feel they are doing more than ever, yet living less than ever. And perhaps it is that very paradox where something in America began to quietly break apart. There is a saying worth pondering. People can endure poverty for a while, but it is very hard to accept the feeling of working more and receiving less. And perhaps that is the feeling spreading among a segment of American workers. If you place two photos side by side, one from 1995 and one from 2026, you will not only see smartphones, electric cars, or artificial intelligence appearing. You will also see a quieter change. The time dedicated to life seems to be increasingly shrinking. A full-time job used to be enough to support a family. Now, for many people, a job is only enough to prepare for the next job. Try to imagine two clocks. The first clock ticks to a familiar rhythm. 8 hours of work, dinner with the family in the evening, weekends taking the kids to the park or visiting grandparents. The second clock ticks much faster. After hours at the company, it's on to side jobs, and on weekends, squeezing in extra work, freelancing, or selling online. The noteworthy point is not in the number of working hours, but in the feeling after each workday. People are not only more tired because they work more, but also because they feel like they are running on a treadmill, sweating a lot, but the distance to the finish line seems to never shorten. That is a paradox of our time. The income of many people may have increased compared to 10 or 15 years ago, but the sense of financial security has not increased correspondingly. When the salary just hits the account, it's also the time when rent, insurance, utility bills, gas, and food line up waiting, with many people describing payday more like a transfer station than a milestone to look forward to. The shock here is not that the wallet empties faster, but the feeling that the fruits of labor vanish on the payment screen before they even touch life. Some even humorously say that their bank account is just a brief stopover before the money continues on its journey. This also explains why more and more people say they don't lack the will to work, but lack the time to truly live. Hobbies that were once very ordinary, such as reading a book, learning a new skill, going camping, or simply sitting down for dinner without checking emails, are gradually becoming luxuries of time. When life revolves solely around work schedules and bills, the first thing to be lost is not money, but the feeling of freedom. And that is the most immeasurable loss. If you've ever felt that the busier you get, the less you progress, please share your thoughts in the comments. Is this an experience unique to America, or is it something happening in many places around the world? Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to continue exploring the stories behind the numbers, because the next part will reveal an even more thought-provoking paradox. Because when people start to feel like they are working more but life is getting smaller, they will seek an escape. And surprisingly, for many Americans, that escape is no longer changing jobs or moving cities. They began looking beyond the borders of the United States to seek something that seemed very simple: a life with a slower pace, easier to breathe, and measurable by the quality of each day, not just by the number of hours worked. That will be the next piece in this story. And hearing that more and more Americans want to move to Mexico, Portugal, Thailand, or Vietnam, many people immediately think this is a story about the cost of living or beautiful beaches. If we look closely at the hundreds of shares on social media and forums, we will see a very interesting common point. What they are looking for is not necessarily another country, but another feeling. They don't talk much about the buildings or the streets. They talk about wanting to wake up in the morning without immediately thinking about bills, without feeling like they are being chased by the clock every minute. People don't just leave because other places are cheaper, but because they want to regain the feeling that life is still within their control. There is a concept in psychology called the ability to predict the future. People do not necessarily have to live in a perfect environment, but they need to feel that if they try today, tomorrow will offer better opportunities. When that feeling diminishes, the brain will continuously be in a state of alertness. Each unexpected bill, each price increase, or each job fluctuation feels like a new wave crashing onto the shore. The point worth pondering is, many people no longer dream of wealth. They only dream of stability. A life where they can plan for the next year without worrying about what will happen next month. That is also the reason why images of coastal towns, small cities, or countries with a slower pace of life are appearing more and more on social media. They do not just represent a geographical location. They become symbols of something very human: the ability to slow down, having dinner without constantly checking emails, having a weekend off without feeling guilty for not earning extra income. The noteworthy thing is, what is considered a luxury is no longer a luxury car or a villa, but a peaceful afternoon free from financial pressure. It sounds simple, but for many people, it is the hardest thing to achieve. Of course, moving to another country is not a miracle. Each place has its own challenges regarding culture, language, laws, and career opportunities. There is no perfect paradise on the world map, but the fact that more and more people are willing to consider such a major decision reflects a change in social mentality. They are not just changing their addresses, but are also looking to change the rhythm of their own lives. If you find these analyses offer a different perspective compared to regular news, please like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with future topics. And perhaps the most important insight of the entire story is this: many people are not running away from America. They are running away from the feeling of always being left behind. When that feeling lasts too long, people don't just change their place of residence, they also change the way they view the future. But what is even more concerning? What happens when a person has tried for a long time, but the brain gradually concludes that all efforts no longer make a difference? That is the most important psychological piece, and it is also the part we will explore right after this. Until now, we have talked a lot about house prices, rent, living expenses, and financial pressure. But perhaps the scariest thing isn't found in any statistics. The scariest thing is what is happening inside the human mind. In psychology, there is a very famous concept called learned helplessness. It sounds complicated, but the idea is very simple. If a person continuously tries, continuously makes an effort, but time and again sees no corresponding results, the brain will gradually conclude that effort no longer makes a difference. And at some point, they stop trying not out of laziness. They stop trying because they no longer believe it will change their lives. The most dangerous society is not when people are exhausted, but when they lose faith in the very value of effort. Imagine a person running on a treadmill. They sweat more each day, but the scenery before them never changes. 1 day, 2 days, then many years passed. In the end, what made them stop was not because their legs were tired, but because they realized they were still standing in the same place. That is also the feeling many people describe when talking about life nowadays. Working overtime, taking on more tasks, cutting expenses. But the goals of buying a house, starting a family, or saving for the future keep getting further away. The turning point lies here. When the rewards of effort become increasingly difficult to see, motivation also begins to wane. And that erosion happens so quietly that many people don't realize they are changing. That's why more and more conversations on social media no longer revolve around the question, how to succeed, but rather to the question, is it worth continuing? The difference between these two questions is very significant. One question arises from hope, the other from doubt. What is worth pondering is, an economy can recover after a recession, prices can stabilize over time, but human trust is not so easily restored. Once the brain becomes accustomed to the feeling that all efforts are in vain, reigniting motivation will be much harder than lowering interest rates or controlling inflation. If you've ever felt like you've done a lot but still see no progress, please share your perspective in the comments. That experience might not be yours alone. And if you find these analyses help you see the issue from a different perspective, don't forget to like and subscribe to continue following the stories behind the numbers. But this is not the final piece of the puzzle yet, because when millions of people experience that psychological state, society will begin to witness an even stranger phenomenon. Two Americas seem to exist in parallel within the same country. On one side are economic, market, and technological indicators that continuously generate positive headlines. On the other side are the people who are still struggling with very mundane questions. How to live, how to save, and how to continue believing in tomorrow. It is this very contrast that will lead us to the next climax of the story. At this point, perhaps we can see the strangest thing about modern America. It seems that two completely different realities are coexisting, happening in the same country, appearing on the same phone screen, but rarely intersecting. In one reality, news reports talk about new records in the stock market, the boom of artificial intelligence, trillion-dollar tech companies, and optimistic growth forecasts. In the other reality, many people's conversations revolve around very mundane questions. Will there be enough money for rent this month? Should I postpone the medical checkup? Or will I have to work extra on the weekend again? Those two pictures are both real, but they no longer seem to reflect the same life. If we only look at the macroeconomic indicators, one could conclude that many sectors of America are still very dynamic. Technology continues to innovate, many businesses are still growing, and new industries are constantly emerging. But at the level of each family, the perception of life can be very different. That is the difference between the economy on the chart and the economy at the dining table. A chart can go up, but that doesn't automatically mean every family feels more at ease. That is a thought-provoking reversal. Growth and the perception of quality of life do not always move in the same direction. Perhaps that's why more and more people say they feel like they are living in two different Americas. An America of new opportunities, where AI, technology, and innovation continuously open up unprecedented possibilities. And another America, where many people still have to carefully consider every small expense, still live paycheck to paycheck, and always feel that just one unexpected event could disrupt all their plans. These two realities do not deny each other, they coexist, but each group of people views the world from a very different window. That makes the debates more difficult, as each side is talking about their own completely real experience. There is a very memorable image. Imagine two passengers sitting on a train together. The person sitting in the front car sees the dawn breaking and believes that the train is moving forward. The person in the last carriage only sees the old tracks gradually disappearing into the mist and feels like they are being left behind. Neither of them is lying. They are just observing from two different positions. That might be the most important insight of this section. Sometimes the division in society doesn't start from who is right or wrong, but from the fact that each person is living in a very different economic and psychological reality. In your opinion, what creates the feeling of a divided reality more? The changes in the economy, the rapid development of technology, or the growing gap in life experiences? Please share your perspective in the comments, as it is the different viewpoints that help us see the bigger picture more clearly. But perhaps the most important thing is not whether America is growing or not, nor how many opportunities lie ahead. The bigger question is, what will happen when those two realities drift apart to the point where they can no longer understand each other? Because a nation can exist with many differences, but it will face a greater challenge when the common belief in the future gradually disappears. And that is also the moment we return to the opening question of the video to find the final answer: what is truly broken in America today? After all that we have just gone through, perhaps it is time to return to the question at the beginning of the video. Is America really collapsing? Perhaps not yet. An economy can still grow. New companies are still being established. Technology continues to change the world. The cities still light up every night. If viewed from above, America is still one of the most dynamic economies on the planet. But sometimes, what determines the health of a nation is not what can be seen from satellites, but the thoughts of those who wake up at 6 in the morning to go to work every day. A country can be very strong economically, but if more and more people no longer believe that their efforts will be rewarded, then the invisible foundation of society begins to shake. Perhaps what is cracking is not the roads, the buildings, or the financial markets. What is fracturing is a promise that once connected many generations of Americans with each other. That is the promise that each generation will live better than the previous one. That hard work will open up opportunities. That the future, though not easy, is still worth hoping for. And when a promise is no longer convincing, people do not immediately get angry. They quietly adjust their expectations. They postpone big plans. They shrink their dreams. They stop talking about the next 10 years and just try to get through this month. That is a change that is very hard to see, but it has the longest lasting impact. However, history also teaches us another lesson. Promises can be tested, but they do not always disappear forever. Many countries have gone through difficult periods and then found ways to adapt and rebuild trust. Therefore, the important question may not be whether America is finished, but how to restore the feeling that effort is still meaningful. And before concluding, I want to leave you with a question. In your opinion, what keeps a country standing strong for a long time? GDP, skyscrapers, or the people's belief that tomorrow can be better than today? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Because sometimes, the strongest thing about a nation is not what is built with concrete and steel, but what is built with hope. When hope still exists, people continue to move forward. But if hope gradually disappears, that is something worth reflecting on for an entire society. If there is one thing that today's story wants to remind us, it is this. The greatest changes in a nation often do not begin with loud events, but with very quiet changes in the thoughts of the people. When more and more people feel that the future is becoming more unpredictable, that's when we need to listen more, rather than just looking at the numbers. What about you? In your opinion, what is really causing many Americans to feel they are gradually giving up on the future? The cost of living, changes in the labor market, or the diminishing belief in the American dream? Please share your perspective in the comments. I really want to read and discuss with everyone. If you love in-depth analysis videos about the economy, society, and trends shaping America and the world, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And please note, this video is made for the purpose of analysis and discussion based on publicly available information, data, and opinions shared in reference sources. The content does not aim to absolutely affirm any viewpoint or attack any individual, organization, or country. Some comments reflect the perspectives of the individuals quoted and may differ from the experiences of others. We always encourage viewers to consult multiple sources of information to gain a more comprehensive and balanced perspective. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next videos.